Hey, yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us for another stream of Mission Briefing. I'm very excited for today's stream because we're going to be looking at building APIs with Prisma and Apollo Server. Now, a little bit shame on myself. I haven't dug into Prisma as early as I had liked. It was always something that I was like, oh, this looks awesome. Like ORMs are a big pain in the butt. I've always used Sequelize really just for like a lack of anything much better. But I finally dug into Prisma, and I won't go too much into detail, but I am hype. Capital HYPE. So I'm very hyped. And I'm even more hyped to have Nicholas Burke here with me from Prisma. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me on stream today and hanging out with us.
Kurt, it's my pleasure. I'm super excited to be on the stream here and hopefully show the people who are watching a little bit more about how they can use Prisma and Apollo to build GraphQL servers with databases.
Yes, I love it. Absolutely love it. So I get, Prisma comes up a lot in conversation, and it's actually become my default recommendation for folks who are getting started building with GraphQL. APIs with Apollo backed by some sort of like SQL database. So it's really cool to have you here and to get this kind of firsthand knowledge, because honestly, I'm like one of the people who would be here attending this stream right now because I'm super hyped on Prisma and I really want to get really good with it. So thanks again. But actually, let's take this a step further first. And there might be some folks here who aren't really familiar with Prisma. So maybe if you'd like, spend a few minutes just kind of walking us through Prisma, what it is, what we can do with it, and maybe a little bit about what we can expect from today.
Yeah, of course. So like you're already sharing your screen, so maybe you just want to pop up the Prisma website on prisma.io and we can start there. Or actually, are you sharing your screen? Sorry.
Currently,
no,
I'm
looking
not.
at
It's
Skype,
just
so
me.
you're not.
Yeah, me and you. But
okay,
I can.
Sorry.
No, I can bring up the website right now. So let me go ahead and transition over. Boom. And now, here we go. So now I've got the website right up.
All right. Yeah. So that was my first confusion already. I'm looking at Skype and thinking I'm looking at Twitch, but yeah, never mind. So we're what is it's an ORM. That's where it qualifies in terms of a category, like what it is, and that stands for Object Relational Mapper. And the actually what that is that it's a tool, it's a library that helps you to translate between two different data formats. The one is the data in your relational database that is organized by tables. And then on the other hand, if you're using an object-oriented programming language like JavaScript or TypeScript, that's where you need the data in an object-oriented structure. And there are a couple of ways how you can perform this mapping. You can perform it by hand by just writing plain SQL queries in your application, or you can use these kinds of higher level abstractions that are typically called ORMs that give you a nice API to work with your data in the first place, and that make you as a developer, as an object-oriented developer, never really leave your comfort zone, right? Because you're used to working with objects, you're used to working with nested data, which is also a concept that doesn't really exist in relational databases, because in relational databases, the data that you're storing is typically normalized, it's flat. You can't have really nested structures in there. So what these ORMs really give you, they make you more productive, because you can stay in the same kind of mental model working with data, and making that kind of translation really easy.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so that was an amazing kind of wrap up there, Prisma. It sounds like you might have talked about this once or twice before.
A few times, maybe. Yeah. And what's interesting about Prisma is that it's not really like a traditional ORM. So you've already mentioned Sequelize, that's has been kind of the default in the JavaScript space for working with databases for a long time, and that's really the kind of ORM that takes a traditional approach, where you're defining you're mapping the tables in your database to classes in your object-oriented programming language.
Yes.
And then you instantiate these classes, and you get these so-called model instances that you can use to read and write data in the database. And Prisma really works very differently compared to these kinds of ORMs. And in fact, for the folks who have been following a little bit the kind of history of Prisma, we were a little bit reluctant to actually calling Prisma an ORM for a long time. And that was mostly because we didn't want to be associated, we didn't want to be put into that same category of traditional ORMs, because these come with a lot of problems, in fact.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that people understand that Prisma is different. So we've been trying to kind of find our own ways of describing what Prisma is and what Prisma does. But ultimately, that was confusing for folks, because a lot of people in the end always said, yeah, but what it is an ORM. It just works differently. So we've adopted that kind of narrative for explaining what Prisma is by now as well. And I think it has worked quite well, because now it's a lot clearer to people at first sight what Prisma actually is, what problems it solves, and what they can do with it.
I love that you brought that up, because I've been following Prisma for many years, right? And at first I wouldn't have made that association, right? Like with ORM, it took a little bit of investigation, but now it's something that I can draw a relationship to. And I like that instead of steering away from it, you're actually now just kind of redefining what it means to be in ORM, right? It's like setting the bar a lot higher. And I think that that's just one really awesome, and it creates a much easier path for folks to get started with working with, relational mappings, with an ORM. And it does it well in a way that we'll go through today, but was very surprising to me, very fun to work with. I don't say this often, but it's a delight to program with. And so things like that put a smile on your face when you're working with them, you want to share with folks. And so I knew that we had to get this going, and share it with more folks, more Apollo folks, because the pairing of Apollo server, the pairing of GraphQL and Prisma feels so natural. And so I won't get too deep into the whys, but just I am a fan of schema definitions, right? Of that DSL, the way you define your schema. And being able to define a database in the similar fashion was very attractive to me. It was nice. I really enjoy that piece, as well as the many other really cool things that y'all do around solving some of the problems that you face in GraphQL that you have to look for other solutions or implement yourself to solve. And so I guess I'll leave that as enough of a lead up, but I think that was my biggest takeaway from working with Prisma, was that the focus on developer experience and addressing the core issues that you faced with normal ORMs, you could tell the attention to detail is there. You can tell that y'all sat down and said, these are the problems that people face when they're trying to access data, and how can we fix that? And it just pairs so well with GraphQL, looking at the caching stuff and more of the things that you do. So I won't get too much into it because I can't explain it well. I am just dipping my toes in at this point, so I'll leave all the explanations to you. So maybe real quick, let's switch pace and talk a little bit about what we're going to actually do today. And so I guess I'll kind of hand that over to you. Nick has taken the time and effort, which thank you, much appreciative, to set up a project to help us kind of look at how things are currently, what you might expect to run into in the world when working with an Apollo server instance. And then kind of giving us this path, the transition path of what does this look like in the Prisma world. And so, but yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about this, the project that we'll use today?
Absolutely. I took a big inspiration from the Apollo server tutorial that you have on your website, and I went through that. And first of all, I want to say I'm amazed. It was a really, really great tutorial. I don't know who wrote it, but that person or the people who were involved did a terrific job in that. Yeah.
Thank you. I will be giving that praise back to the team. Yeah, it's much appreciated.
So I'm a big fan of well-written tutorials and well-written articles. I mean, it has been my day job for 4 years to basically write about technical stuff. Yep. And if you do it for such a long time, you just you really notice a lot of things that I don't think you like notice when you just get into technical writing. And for that tutorial, I really noticed that there was a lot of attention to detail, and that really made me happy when going through it. So yeah, what I did, I took the project, the backend part of what's being built there, the Apollo server, that currently mixes in the tutorial 2 data sources. It talks to the SpaceX API to get information about the launches and the associated missions and the rockets and all of that. So that's one part of the API of that Apollo server. And the second part is the one that uses a database. And in the tutorial, the database part is not really covered. It just comes, if you clone the repo, it just comes with all the stuff already implemented using SQLize. And I thought, okay, what would it look like if that wasn't using SQLize, but if it was using Prisma?
Love it.
So what I did, I pretty much created this empty project right now that has no database attached to it yet. It only has this one GraphQL query that's actually implemented. That's the launches query that goes against the SpaceX REST API. And what we're going to do, we're going to add the database to it from scratch, running migrations. Of course, we'll use Prisma for that. And then we'll use prismaclient, which is Prisma's component that you can use to send queries to the database in order to actually implement the resolvers that are resolving the queries. So I actually haven't made any changes to the GraphQL schema, and neither to the resolvers in the project. I just changed the user data source. And it's also what I love about this abstraction of data sources, that like I didn't have to touch a lot of code to switch out SQLize with Prisma, because like the abstraction already like told me like where to do it. And in the end, I only had to, in effect, change a single file basically in order to get this to work.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that was really nice to see.
Yeah, and I just want to rewind just a couple seconds here to when you mentioned migrations, which is something that is notoriously a problem in Node ecosystem currently. At least it always has been for me. I find most of the solutions not to be done very well, and I really like the way that Prisma handles them. I haven't personally been able to use them yet. I've only really used the client as far as doing the access stuff, so I'm very excited for this part today. Anyone who's worked with databases extensively knows that migrations are a very large part of that process and needs to be first class. Otherwise, it's just, you're going to run into a lot of issues, or basically have to roll your own kind of solution for making sure your database is in the correct state. And, that's not what we want to focus on, right? Like, we want to adopt tools, frameworks, etc., that allow us to focus on the thing that we need to do, the product, right? The service, whatever it is, that we're building. And so it's just another thing that's like, kudos to y'all. As a matter of fact, let me just give y'all a round of applause real quick, because it's good stuff. Yeah, you sure can. So Mr. Darkside missed the link. So let me grab the link here to the starter for you. There you go. And in case, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Prisma, but there you go. Boom. Yeah, let's see. Okay, so awesome. Okay, so I guess we could start, right? We've kind of covered what we're going to go over. So let's do this. I'm going to get this browser out of the way, and we're going to bring up yield VS Code. So what we have here is the starter that Nick was just talking about. We've got it installed in VS Code. We've got it running here, so you can see yarn start. Our server is running. It's listening on port 4000. So we're good to go. I can also do fun things too, which I think you'll enjoy, which is I'm going to command click this to open it. Oh, well, you had to open here, didn't you? All right, let me copy that. Bring it over here, and I can actually share my local host terminals with you as well. So let me do that, and then you can open up localhost 4000. Oh, it's already shared, and you'll have Playground in your browser as well.
All right. Yeah, the browser is running. the playground is running, the GraphQL server is running. Like, why don't we just go ahead and test the launches query from the README?
Yeah.
I don't know, like
that's
yeah.
a default.
So like that's another one. If you just if you just copy the one from
I'm on it.
the README just to make sure everything works, and then maybe after that we can quickly walk through the file structure to give folks an overview what we already have in the project right now.
Do a little prettify, a little clean up. Wimp. There we go. Run it. Boom. So here we go. Data launches. I know this is a little small. Let me try to make this a little bigger. Here we go. So we got our launches. I mean, as you can see, I'm not going to start reading off properties, but the query itself is working. Yeah. Oh,
perfect.
Kyle, you are still missing your sticker. I will send you a link right after this to make sure that you get it. And just for folks on stream who might not know what he's referencing, I have here these lovely real friends share terminal stickers. And anytime someone comes on the stream with me and I share my terminal with them, I like to send them a sticker if they want one, because one, it's super cute and fun, and two, you really are. If you share your terminal with somebody, I mean, that's like the,
very intimate.
It is. Yeah, it's like that's a lot of trust.
I'm already looking forward to my sticker.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. So here we go. So we're up, we're running, and yeah, I love it. Let's go through the file tree and just kind of get an overview of this project and what's going on in here. So I'm going to open up source and let me see if I can make this. I don't know if the file tree gets bigger. No. Okay. So there we go. Just while we're going through the file tree, I'll go ahead and blow that up a little bit. So we're good here. So
and one side note also about the project itself, I also took the liberty to migrate it to TypeScript. So in the tutorial was in plain JavaScript, and I thought, okay, I'll try to make this a TypeScript version. That's it's like it's like mostly for my own benefit that when we're doing live coding, that it just feels so much safer to me to have that as a backup. Like I always feel completely lost when I'm in just like plain JavaScript, and like I'm not a super experienced developer, so it just like it gives me these like kind of guardrails that I can lean into when it becomes a bit more dangerous.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of types myself as well. Not every project that I do in TypeScript. I do a lot of stuff in JavaScript as well, but absolutely love it. I like not having to store context in my head, and the amount of space that TypeScript frees up, invaluable. Plus it catches it removes an entire layer of testing, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, all right. So we won't go too deep into the TypeScript discussion because I could talk about that forever.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also like it's not super what we're going to do. I just like really for my own benefit and safety,
Absolutely.
basically.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I like TypeScript as well, and the more that I see it, I'm still. It's also something I'm not. What I would consider like very skilled at yet. Like I understand TypeScript and how it works, but I get a little caught up with more complex data structures and things like that, and dealing with like interfaces and all that fun jazz. And I think generics or templates are called. Anyway, long story short is like, yeah, it's a lot, but knowing it, once you get past that curve, it's very beneficial. Oh, nice. Coops45 said they started working on learning TypeScript about 2 weeks ago. Already loving it. Yeah, it's just like, you start to notice the benefits right away. And I think once you start trying it and like, you're like, okay, this is really helpful. And then for me, like I'm, shameless. I'll throw any's in there. Like if I need to make the compiler happy, I'll any it and then I'll come back later.
So to be fair, I also set strict mode for this one to false and also have a couple of any's, but we do get the auto completion where we need it and all of that, and that's what I cared about.
Matters. Exactly. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and go through the project. Where should I lead off with? Actually, you can open up these files. Why don't I follow you? So that's something that's very neat. So oops, let me go ahead and follow you.
Right.
If I can get VS Code to work. Maybe I can't follow you? Why is that not working?
Opened index.ts in the live session.
Yeah, but it's not letting me follow you. Oh, maybe, hang on. let me just get this file is not currently editing a shared document. Well, you see it. Yes, you are.
All right,
I think it just needed to catch up. No, I think it was just like sometimes it gets a little wonky, but most times it works really well. There we go.
All right.
There we go.
So here we go. I think you can even, yeah, exactly, collapse this. Will it new files if I now do this? Let me
Absolutely.
check.
Yeah, it definitely should. Boom. Resolvers TS. There we go.
Oh, perfect. So let's go back to index.ts as our starting point here. And as you can see in this file, it's really just a super plain and straightforward GraphQL server so far. We just import Apollo server from the Apollo server library, our type defs, our resolvers. We have one data source at the moment. The second one is commented out. That's what we want to build. And then we just start the server, and that's what already resolves the launches query that we saw in the playground. So if we head over to the resolvers file, we can see that we already have a bunch of code in here. And that's what I meant before, that I didn't actually touch this file much. I think I might have 2 or 3 very minor tweaks. Here, for example, I commented out the data sources user.api is booked launch and just returned false for this one. So that's something that we're going to adjust a little bit later. But aside from that, really, I didn't make any changes just because it already calls out to the data sources that we need later. So the data sources that are going to resolve the actual queries and mutations are implemented in the data sources directory where we have the launch.ts and the user.ts file. So if we take a quick look at the launch.ts file right here, we can see that this just really implements a pretty standard REST data source from Apollo. That's pretty much exactly the one that's also used in the tutorial. So I didn't even make any modifications to that, except that I added some kind of type annotations for that for the TypeScript setup. And now the interesting part is the user.ts data source, where we so far just have pretty much the stubs or fairly empty implementations of all the methods that it provides. All of these methods were previously implemented using Sequelize, and today what we're going to do is we're going to implement these one by one using Prisma.
Love it.
And yeah, to show people maybe that we already have these operations available, you could quickly go back to the playground and just for example, send the me query or the login query. Let's already send a login query in a new tab. Maybe create a new tab in the playground, and then or it's actually a mutation.
Mutation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the login mutation.
Mutation, and then login, and then boop. And then that is login, and that is going to, oh wait, it's going to take
an email. Takes an email.
Yeah, so that's going to be email, and that's a string.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, and then it also takes anything else or just email?
No, yeah, that's it. Just the email.
Cool. So then email. Is that how it works? Yeah, that's it, right? It's weird. I write so many queries.
Yes, you could also just hard code it, to be honest. You could just, instead of using a parameter, where you're using
habits,
just delete all that.
Yeah, let's just do a string.
Cool. Exactly. And just put it right there. And then Kurt at Apollo.
Yeah, there we go. And then Robert Table's in the chat. What's up, buddy? How's it going? Thank you for dropping in. And then Apollo GraphQL.com. Cool. And so let's see, what do we get back here? We get back ID, email, trips. Let's just grab email and trips. And under that, we'll grab something I don't know, a name or something. Site. We'll grab the mission. Cool.
I think the mission also has subfields. Yeah.
Oops. Yep. Good call.
Also.
Yeah. Name. There we go. That's what I'm missing.
Yeah.
Shaboopy. Cannot
All
read
right.
property, find, or create user of undefined.
Exactly, and that's because we haven't implemented that part yet, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what we want to do. So when we're opening this playground tab the next time and sending off that mutation, then it should work, and it should actually go and create a user in a database that we're now going to configure with Prisma.
Wild. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to jump back here into VS Code.
Yes.
And actually, since we're doing the share and you're very familiar, instead of you telling me like type this, period, type that, why don't you go ahead? I'm following you. So I'm going to let you steer and I'll ask you questions. We'll just reverse this. Normally I do a bunch of the coding, but today you're doing
All right.
the coding.
Happy to.
Love it.
Happy to. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're adding the Prisma CLI. So like Prisma comes with a CLI that lets you accomplish certain workflows, and that's typically the starting point that you use when you're starting out with Prisma. It's also what we saw on the prisma.io website. One of the main call to actions was just to copy exactly this command and install the Prisma CLI as a dependency in your project. So here I'm using also -d to make sure this is a development dependency. We don't need this like running and deployed to a production server. Once this has been installed, there is a command that's called init. Yarn Prisma init is what we're going to call then, and that's going to create our very bare bones Prisma setup.
Okay.
So I'm going to run this now, yarn Prisma init, and this is just going to create a new folder with 2 files, or in fact, I'm not even sure if it puts the .n file. So it also takes a .n file, but it puts that into the root of your project. It's the Prisma folder. So if you now open the site nav,
there we go.
You'll see that we have the new Prisma directory also up on top.
Yep. So we got a schema.prisma
and in there we have,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Actually, we're going to skip the .env today. We're just like using SQLite, so we don't have anything to hide. We just hard code everything right there in the schema. So let's go ahead and open the Prisma schema.
Oh, okay.
I think you're still following me, right?
I am, yeah. We're already there.
All right.
Is there an extension that I should install?
Yes. Absolutely. I guess.
I wonder if this will make me restart. Yeah, so this Prisma one here, Prisma 2.114
yes.
or 2.14.
Exactly.
Cool. Hopefully we don't need like a whole restart. We'll see. I don't think so with this type of extension. You never know though. VS Code be like that sometimes. All right.
Yeah, big fan of that extension because it also helps you to see that when I'm now the Prisma schema, it helps you in the Prisma schema with auto-completion, with linting, with formatting, with quick fixes, like even inserting like missing parts that like you might have glossed over when you configured your schema. So it's really, really powerful and yeah, just incredible developer experience here.
Heck yeah, love that. So while it's installing, real quick, we had a question, which is, does Prisma have a Docker image? But I think that's like assuming that Prisma itself also contains the DB, but like really you would just use like the Postgres Docker image and connect to that locally. Prisma itself sits like in between the resolver, like the endpoint and the database. So it's the ORM essentially, like replacing something like SQLize. So I hope that
exactly
helps. Robert, let me know. Or actually, David or Robert Tables. I don't know if you want me to call you by your handle or your name.
So this question might also have been informed by Prisma 1, where in fact there was a Docker image, and Prisma 1 was very different. Ultimately, it solves similar still with a very different architecture, and there what's now running as an npm library in your application used to be a standalone server that you had to deploy with Docker as well. So maybe like that's where that association come from. But with Prisma 2, there is no Docker image for Prisma anymore. It's really just an.
Very cool. Okay, nice.
You got the syntax highlighting. All right, then I think we're all set, and I can go ahead and start writing the schema. So the first thing that we'll do is we're not going to use Postgres for this one, but we'll use SQLite as a database, which is just a local file that I can use. And I can configure it in here. And here I can provide the path to the file that I want to use. And I'm just going to use the exact name and location that has been used in the actual tutorial, which was a store.db file in the root of the project.
Cool.
And the thing that we're doing next is we're defining our database schema. And we talked about that earlier, that traditional ORMs, the way how it works is typically you define database tables as classes. And then you somehow might be able to generate migrations from these classes and run these migrations against the database. Prisma takes a different approach here. Instead of defining your models as classes, we have this DSL, this domain-specific language. We call it the PSL, actually, like Prisma Schema Language, but it's actually not that important what it's called. It's just the way how you define your database schema using Prisma. And the core primitive that you get there is a model, and a model maps to a table in the database. And what we're going to implement is functionality with users and trips. So at the moment, we only have these launches that come from the REST API. But what we want to build is an API that allows you to kind of store users and their trips for these launches in the database. So the data model that we're going to use will be will consist of users and trips. And one thing that we'll add to both of these models are just the ID created at and updated at fields. So here is how I'm doing this. I'm using a lot of the auto completion that's provided by the extension.
Yeah. Autocomplete is amazing. And I'd just like to say that again, so jumping back to how I prefer working with like a DSL as opposed to code first, right? Like I like working from like a schema first approach. It's just something that I prefer. I find it easier for me to kind of work my head around what's happening when it's laid out this way. I just very much prefer it at this point. Maybe it's the years of GraphQL that I've been doing, but I mean, now not knocking things like Nexus, which actually have a really awesome functionality, and that's also something else I've been looking in that's kind of got me like, okay, code first schemas, I feel it. But yeah, this is very easy for me to read and understand what's happening. Right? Like,
so like that modeling language has been inspired heavily by GraphQL SDL. Like, so it's like very similar. And if you're already familiar with GraphQL SDL, then picking up the Prisma schema language like really won't cause any trouble or even learning overhead for you. It will come very natural. And especially with the VS Code extension, you can't do anything wrong, basically.
Yeah. Actually, Coops 45 is following along. They're coding along with us and loving the autocomplete from the extension. So
Sweet.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Right. Yeah.
So we have our user and trip models. So let's add a couple of more properties to those. So our user is going to have an email, and like what I'm doing here is just I'm copying the data model from the Apollo GraphQL tutorial. So like one by one, this was initially built using SQLite, and I just build the exact equivalent now using Prisma. And in the data model, the user has an email, has a token, and it has a relation to the trip model. So we'll have a one-to-many relation between users and trips. And here you might have seen that I just saved the file and it automatically inserted this into the file as well, which is super helpful. I just want to make a little tweak here to make this lowercase.
That is super helpful.
But I think other than that, this looks good. Then a trip has to be associated with a launch. So we'll give it a launch ID. And then we also want to ensure that only one user can book a trip with a certain launch ID. So we want to ensure that we can never have a trip that has the same user ID and the launch ID, because then it would mean it would be a double booked trip by a single person. And the way how we can represent exactly that constraint with Prisma is by adding this this unique attribute here to the model and passing the user ID and launch ID fields to it, so that in the database we'll have the constraint, and the database will make sure for us that this constraint is being adhered to, no matter what's happening on the application layer.
This is wild. And so it's just like, is this so readable? Like, and it's so easy for me to follow, like, what is happening here. It's just like, hey, here's an array of fields to make sure that these are unique, like, among all of the entries. Like, this is, I don't know, for folks who have worked with SQL or even, SQLIs, like other ORMs, this is where you start to get into the complexity of like a lot of code. And then, so now it's like the overhead of just understanding how your database is structured requires you to jump around, like from models, right? And the models connect to other models, and then which one has the definition of uniqueness, like defined on it, like, and then just trying to bring all those like circular relationships back together in your code. It just like creates this complexity just to set up a database, like just to have the database.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big plus points, I think, of Prisma, that it has this human readable data model, because exactly as you said, no matter if you're using plain SQL or if you're using an ORM to define your tables, you always end up with some weird structures that are not really nice to read. And you might have to jump around files to understand what's going on. And this Prisma schema file really is the source of truth for what your database schema looks like, and on the other hand also what your application models, so the types that you're getting in your applications and the queries that are exposed to you, what they look like. So this kind of single source of truth, I think, is one of the biggest benefits that Prisma can provide. And in fact, it's funny that like what we hear a lot as a point of kind of like criticism of Prisma when people first get into it is, oh, they say that they don't want to learn this this new language to define their database schema. But then just the first reaction after 10 minutes after they've actually tried it, so just not the initial reluctance of, oh no, there is something new I need to learn, but actually something where they've tried it and they felt, okay, this is very different from what I'm used to. That's when they get really excited about it.
Absolutely.
So I'm this this way of defining your database schema is just a killer feature, I think, that you don't get anywhere else.
Yes, I completely agree, and I think too that it's a bit of like a misplaced assumption, because it is a new learning curve. But to me, it's honestly easier to learn this than it would be to learn how to configure SQLize, or how to just do this in some other migration for, I don't know, Bash scripts, like Ruby scripts, or like, however it is you plan to manage your migrations. There are certain other tools that will let you do it in code again, but like, again, this is, you still have that cognitive overhead that is heavier, in my opinion, again, than learning this small contained DSL.
Right. There has been a question in the chat by Nim Grger.
Yeah, NimGRG, right?
What about NimGRG? What about using the @ID attribute instead of the @unique one? And that would, in theory, be possible as well, but then I would have to remove the ID up here, so I could do this basically.
I see.
Okay, then I would have to make these required as well. And by the way, the @ID or @ID field means or attribute means that this column in the underlying database, so all these fields, they map to columns in the database, they will have a primary key constraint. And in relational databases, only a single column or a single combination of columns can have a primary key constraint. So in this case, it wouldn't even be possible to do this twice. A model can only ever have a single ID. So this would throw an error. And instead, we would just use the unique ID to just keep the initial ID here. But in theory, it would be possible.
One quick thing I want to talk about. Can you put it back to ID real quick? Because on my side over here, I'm just hovering over the squiggly error, and I imagine this is the extension at work. But like this also is something that you don't get in other solutions, which is it's telling me what's wrong. Like right now, I know what is wrong. Like in other situations and scenarios, I would have to figure out like, well, why is this not working, right? Like there's not probably some like weird database error or something like that. But yeah, not so smart.
What's the pop-up saying for you though right now? What's the pop-up saying for you right now though?
It says error validating model trip. The ID definition refers to the optional fields user ID, launch ID. ID definitions must reference only required fields. So
right. Yeah, so perfect. And so I want to give a big shout out to my colleague Carmen, who's the only person who's working on that, or who used to be. I think like by now there are a couple of more people who are also involved with it from time to time, but she was basically the person who built that entire VS Code extension pretty much from scratch. And she also gave a talk at Prisma Day last year where she talks about that.
I need to watch
that. If folks want to check that out, you can go to the Prisma YouTube channel. It's a lightning talk, so just like a 5-minute talk, and gives you a really nice overview of all the important features.
Let's give her,
so huge shout out to Carmen.
Huge shout out, Carmen. Nice job. Let's give her a round of applause. Yo, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Oh, I love it.
All right. Cool. Back to the code, I would say. We now have 2 models in our Prisma schema. What we don't have is a database and any tables. So just because we wrote the schema does not mean yet that we have a database. We have to take this now and we have to create a database and apply the database, or apply that schema against the database. And in this case, I can actually do both with a single command, and that's the Prisma migrate command. So I'm running the Prisma migrate def command in this case. Def means that it will generate SQL migration files that it stores on the file system, so that if I wanted to somehow customize the migration, for example, it might be that I want to rename a field, or I want to rename a column instead of creating a new one. That's what I can do when I then just generate these migration files and customize them and then execute them against the database. That's not the case here. So I can use the def command to just generate the migration files and at the same time also execute them already against the database.
Got it.
So I'll also give this migration a name. I'll just call it init. And I have to append this preview feature flag because Prisma Migrate is fresh out of the oven. Just a couple of weeks ago, we released it for preview. And we are really close to the production-ready launch. So this question actually already has been asked on the chat before, and I'm assuming it'll be a couple of weeks. I don't think it'll be a lot more. And of course, the more people are using it, the more people are testing it, the more feedback we get, the earlier we can release it.
You hear that, folks? Yeah, go try this out. Yeah.
Share your feedback on GitHub and on the Prisma Slack, and it'll be released even faster. All right, let me go ahead and run this command. So now it's generating the migration files. It shows you where that happens in a new directory called migrations with a new subfolder that has a timestamp on it. And in there, we've got the migration.sql file. So that's now on the file system. I can also very quickly just open that up.
Oops, I accidentally, there we go. So I'm trying to, here we go. So we got migrations.
Here we see the SQL that has been generated from that.
So cool.
And that already has been executed against the database as well. Before we move on, another cool tool tool that comes with Prisma and that you really don't get with any other ORM that's out there, and that's Prisma Studio. So Prisma Studio is basically a GUI that you can use to view and edit data in your database. And it's really refreshing to use if you compare it with any other of the database GUIs that's out there that typically feel like they're like straight out of the 90s. And just like a very low level abstraction.
Yeah, webmaster feel, webmaster vibes.
Exactly.
I love it.
So what we can do is you just run the yarn Prisma Studio command. It also exists as a standalone app for Linux, so you can also just go and download it from the Studio repo and install it on your machine.
That's so wild.
Exactly, or it just runs in the browser. And there you can click on the user and trip models, and this will open up the table view, basically, where you can browse the data.
Because this is running on localhost, I believe I can share this with you as well. Let me see if this works. I'll be very curious to see. I think I have to do like HTTP. We'll call it the DB. Okay, cool. I'm just curious to see if that actually works. I'm more than happy to go through and do this stuff, but I just want to see if even that works through the live share. So you should be able to open this up and run it on your computer.
Right.
Did it work?
I have it on the computer, but like you're not following me anymore with this, right?
If you do things, I just was curious if it worked. Yeah, like no one would be able to see it, so I'll definitely do it. But isn't that cool?
That's crazy. Of course, I just made the connection that of course it's just like the process is running on your machine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's insane.
Yeah. I love it. I love the
from Berlin
live
to San
share.
Francisco.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'm in Virginia Beach.
Or actually, you're right. You're not in right. Exactly. You're not in SF.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not that I have anything against SF, but I love Virginia Beach. It's great here. Come live here, folks. Come be my friend. All right, so we're gonna add a record.
So.
What do we do next? Or we do
I
that
think
through
we'll
code?
just wait. I just actually wanted to show that.
Got
exactly. We'll do that through code. I just wanted to show you that we'll go back to it, send our login mutation to make sure
that
the user has been created.
Okay.
So we have our database, we have our tables. We are ready to implement that login mutation. And as we recall, let's first go into the resolvers.ts file to check out the resolver for the login mutation. It's right here. And I can command click on the user API right here, find or create user method, and it'll bring me straight to that file and that method that we need to implement.
Amazing.
And like that's one of the benefits that you get with TypeScript, by the way, that you can now do command click within the files, amazing. And you just end up at the definition of the stuff that you're looking at. One quick note, there already is a little bit of code here that I just have left over from the previous implementation. It basically just retrieves an email address from the context. We'll implement that later. That's just like the authentication approach that was used in the Apollo tutorial with Sequelize before. I didn't change anything about that. It also uses an npm package that's called isEmail to validate if it's actually a valid email. And if we are at this point right here, we are sure that there is an email. And we can now go ahead and implement this find or create user method. And find or create user, it already tells us what the method is supposed to do, right? It either should retrieve a user record from the database if it exists, and if it doesn't exist yet, then it would create it itself. Exactly. And the way how you can achieve this with Prisma is by using an upsert method, or an absurd like an absurd method that you can call, and you just pass the data that just email. Let me quickly go ahead and actually make sure that this is typed, so we can now go ahead and make sure that this Prisma client here is typed by importing Prisma client from the @prisma/client package. And you might be a little bit surprised now that this is working, because I didn't actually go and install this package on the stream yet, but it was installed under the hood when I was running the Prisma migrate dev command. So every time I'm running the migrate dev command, it actually updates this node module that contains the code for the Prisma client. And so it also installs it for me under the hood. So now this is typed, and if I now want to go ahead and use it, I can call my first Prisma client query. And I'll just go ahead and use a lot of autocompletion here in case it works.
Does it show up for you? Sometimes it might not show up for you because it's VS Code Live Share, but I could get it to pop up, I believe, so folks could check it out. Let me just see if I can get it to work. And
try it. If it's not working, it might also be that you have to restart the TypeScript server. But that's actually super easy. If you hit Command-Shift-P on your in your VS Code, and then you just type restart and
TS server.
Restart TS server, exactly. And if you do that and you remove the dot again, for example, and then put the dot and then maybe Control space.
Yeah, it's not coming up for me, but I imagine this is something. Oh, there it was. There it was. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's on this. Okay. And now if you hit Control C, Control space again.
There it is. Use.
Now you see
trip user. Okay. Now we're in.
Exactly.
In my hacker voice, we're in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we see all the operations that are exposed by my Prisma client instance. And in this case, I want to use the absurd absurd query on my user instance, on my user model. And it takes 3 relevant options that I need to configure, and all of them will pretty much look the same because I'm looking for a user with a certain email. If that user doesn't exist, then I want to create it. And the data that I'm passing here also is just the email. Everything else I don't need to pass here.
It will automatically add created at and an ID and stuff, because we already specified to auto increment and everything, if I remember correctly, inside of our schema definition.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
That's exactly it. And that's pretty much all I have to do in order to get this to work. And I return the user from this. And now we have a working method right here.
I have one quick question, which is, so we're doing a finder create, and then we're passing in the email, but I'm noticing that you also added this update line. And I'm curious as to what role, I understand where and create, get it from here if it matches, if not create it, but I'm curious about the update line.
Yeah, that's just because of the way how the Prisma client API is structured at the moment. So what this absurd method usually does, it finds or updates a certain record, and that's also what the name is coming from. But you can use it for a find or create as well. And in this case, because the Prisma client is also strongly typed, it wouldn't allow me to do this. It would throw an error if I wouldn't supply this one.
Got it.
So I don't need it for this use case, but TypeScript needs it in order to run properly.
Got it.
If I was using plain JavaScript, then I could remove it. And in fact, that's not optimal in the Prisma client API. So it would be nicer if I didn't have to submit it for this kind of use case, or if there even was a dedicated operation that would be called find or create or get or create. And I believe we even have an open feature request for that.
Yeah.
But it's also like very well documented in our docs that if you have this find or create or get or create use case, that you can just achieve it like this, and you have to accept for now that you also have to pass the update
which is
option right here.
No problem at all. It's a very small price to pay for what you get. But I was just curious as to like, you know, what the need was
absolutely.
there. When I was messing around with it, it's funny because I was in JavaScript, so I just did where and create. Right. But then I was seeing you add update here, I was like, oh, am I missing something? So I just wanted to know what was going on. Yeah. Real quick before we move a little bit further, we had a question from chat, which is, could you select what fields to return from the user model?
Yes, that's what the additional two options are for here. They're called include and select.
Oh, nice.
Are they already showing up for you?
I'm not seeing it, but if I go in here and hit boop, now they are. Include and
control
select.
space. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with select specific fields of the model, and with include, you can effectively eagerly load a relation. So in this case, we can go and load all the trips of the user if we were just including them with include.
Got you.
All right, so that's the one thing that we have to do. So the implementation of the find or create method is done, but we actually haven't instantiated that Prisma client. So at the moment, we just assume that this user API right here, it gets this Prisma instance. But if we're going to index.ts right here, we see that this is not the case yet. For one, we don't even instantiate the user API data source. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And then secondly, we're going to go ahead.
That Prisma client, right?
Exactly, that Prisma client instance. So Prisma client, we're instantiating it. Oh, come on.
The joys of live coding, right?
Love it. All right, and we are passing this. So that should be all we need in order to run the login mutation now. Right. So I stopped the GraphQL server before. We can just go ahead and restart it with yarn start. I'll let you do that part, and I'll also let you run the login mutation.
Love it.
So that folks can see what's going on. You might have to run yarn for some reason. Just like run yarn again. I had this a couple of times that for some reason my npm packages were a little bit messed up. I don't know why, but just like rerunning yarn and then running yarn start should fix that.
Already better. Yeah, TS node. There's an issue with TS node, it said. Couldn't find it or something. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I wonder if that's like because I restarted the TypeScript server or something. Maybe something in there happened. Who knows?
Could be. I think it's something with node modules, but I don't know. All right, let's test this. Let's go back to the playground.
So I'm gonna.
You still have your.
Yeah, I have it here. And actually, the schema hasn't changed, so I shouldn't even have to refresh. I should just be able to send this. So let's go ahead and do this.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Cannot read property ID of undefined. Path login trips at user API. User TS line 67.
All right, so that's the first interesting challenge here. Let's see. 67. Well, in the resolvers. User. No, that doesn't make any sense. That's been used.
Yeah, that's not even being called, right? I think that's just like an incorrect path.
Yeah, like what did the error message
let's
say
go back
again? Can you just
for sure open, type error again. Cannot read property ID of undefined. So maybe it did not return a user. Resolvers line 8 is like the
Right, I can try to run this as well. Let's see. I'm getting the same error. So let me see. And resolvers. Find out. Ah, okay.
Ooh,
So for some reason, here. So it says that it can't read find or create user of undefined. And find or create user is a method on the user data source, on the user API thing here.
Oh.
So for some reason, it thinks that this hasn't been passed. And it might just be because I forgot to save the file, to be honest. After I made the changes in index.ts, I think I didn't save. So let's just try it. We have to stop the server.
Yeah, let's try that again.
So now I think I saved it. And let's see if it's working now.
Starting it up.
And if that's still not working, we can try to console log the user API property of the data sources in the resolver to see if that exists or not, and then dive deeper.
Okay, yeah, it seems to be the same error, I think. I'm also just gonna copy this and reload.
Actually,
this is different.
Well, no, for me,
it worked.
It's but I'm okay. Wait, am I? So I'm still connected to you, right? To your local host. I just ran literally the same query, and for me it worked. Just maybe that helps.
No, but maybe it's something to do with. Do you have the exact same query?
I'm just okay.
Maybe I
so
should get rid
try
of trips.
To remove the trips.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Try to remove the trips and just do like ID, email, and token, or just ID and email.
Yeah, I'll do
maybe.
ID and email. Yeah, that was probably it. There we go. That was it.
All right.
Which makes sense.
And now
we haven't done trips yet. That doesn't exist. Okay.
Exactly. And it actually already had created this user record, but it just still threw the GraphQL error because that relation of the GraphQL user type hasn't been implemented. So it threw an error, but under the hood, it did create your user record. That's also why you have the ID 1.
Yep.
And in fact, I created a user with my email, and I have ID 2 because I ran the mutation a couple of seconds later than you did.
And we can come here, and I'm going to refresh this, and Prisma client error. So I'm trying to rerun. Do I need to rerun Studio?
Yeah, I think so. You should probably stop it in your terminal and then just rerun. Yeah.
All right, let's do that because I'm just very curious to also see that. That's visually being able to work with your SQL data is well, I mean, it's like amazing. It's paramount. It's like very important. And I hate all of the other. Sorry, hate's a very strong word. I am not a big fan of all of the other GUIs. And here we go. So we've got created at, updated at, email, token is null, but we would expect that. We didn't do anything. We didn't create any tokens. But yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool.
Exactly.
That this loads up in the browser. Like this is just another thing. Going back to like configuration, like even with the other clients, you have to do this whole thing of like configuring all of the proper fields, like where is it pointing at, and like names, like root names and passwords and like all this other stuff. This I just get to run Prisma Studio and boom, here's a GUI for my database. Very nice.
Yeah. And like what this also like provides you with as a developer, this kind of quick validation that something worked, right? Like it really like provides you with a lot of confidence that your database workflows are actually going in the right direction. And I feel that this is always like one of the biggest pain points that I had in the past with databases, that it always feels a little bit brittle. I'm never 100% sure if the thing that I did there or that I tried there actually worked. And that's what we're really trying to solve with Prisma. We're trying to give you that safety net that makes you confident in your database workflows.
It also shortens the feedback loop, because in the other scenario is now I have a login mutation, but then I have to have another tab that has like a user's query, and then I got to check it. And there's just like a lot of other things that I have to do there. Then there could be weird permissions things, like maybe, you know, I need authentication now to test that out, right? Like it adds a lot of complexity.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah. How about what we do next is we already try the me query, or actually let's go into the resolver file first again, real quick. I'll open it up. I think you're still following.
Let me make
there
sure.
We go.
Yep. Cool. Oh, I'm not. Let me put that back on. There we go. All right.
And we see that the me query right here. Do you see it?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It uses the same data source method, right? It also uses find or create user. And we already implemented that. So in theory, the me query should already return the same user if we pass the token that we got from the login mutation. So what this login mutation also returns, it returns a token, an authentication token that will be able to identify you as a user. So like maybe just go ahead and send that login mutation once more and add the token field to the selection set of the query.
Okay, because I did notice in our database that token said null. So I'm curious. Oh, but it's there. Interesting.
Exactly. It's actually generated on the fly. We're not storing it in the database, and in fact, that's also something that like might have been a bug. I don't know if it was intended in the Apollo tutorial, but there also the token column was created in the database, but it was actually never populated. So I just like took it one by one. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to look into that or not, but we're not going to store it here either.
No, absolutely
but
not.
It's being returned because it's generated on
look. So I've been playing Breath of the Wild. So like I had to update one of my armor sets, so I had to like write down the things I need to go get. So that's hilarious. That's what's there. But yeah, I'm gonna take a new note of that so I can bring that to the team.
All right. Cool. But in theory, if we now pass this token as the authorization header in the HTTP headers field down left, and we send the me query in a new tab, then theoretically we should get the user data of the user that we just created.
Okay.
So let's try that. If you want to open a new tab,
yeah,
exactly.
Copy that token, right? Okay. Yeah. So I got this. So now, yeah, let's do query me. Do I pass the token like this?
No. So like the token is just if you open the HTTP headers.
Oh, that's my header token. That's like my authorization.
Exactly. And you just replace the one with the token that you copied.
Boom. Got it. So now we can just query ID. Email. Boom.
Good. Yeah. So like are the braces still there? In the headers? If you scroll, like in the headers panel down left.
Yeah, it's there.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, I didn't see that.
But I did get
okay.
null.
It still returns null. Yeah, exactly.
Oh right, but it should because we didn't pass the token yet, or no?
Well, exactly. We so there is one part that we haven't implemented yet, and if we go back, so I can quickly show that in VS Code. Because at this point, we don't get an email input for this from the GraphQL query or mutation itself. This is just what we get when we send the login mutation. But we would have to, in this case, actually retrieve it from the context here. And in order to retrieve it from the context, we first have to define the context and set it up. And that's what we do in index.ts right here. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because I did implement that part, and that's just a lot of writing that I just don't want to repeat here.
No, thank you. Yeah. I do have an elevator sound that I can play for those moments. But
that would be appropriate.
Yeah. We don't want that.
We don't need it, exactly. So here we go. I think that should be it. Let's. So we are creating the context for those of you who are fairly new to GraphQL. The context object is a way for GraphQL resolvers to communicate with each other and basically pass information down the resolver chain. Yeah. And the root of that resolver chain is right here where we instantiate the server. It first goes into the root resolver and then into all the children resolvers. And that object that we are creating here, in fact, that we are returning here, that's what every resolver gets to see as the third resolver argument.
Yep.
So that's the context, is the third resolver argument. And the code that I added is basically the code that's needed in order to first retrieve the value from the authorization header. So this part is exactly just reading what you wrote in the GraphQL playground in the bottom left. It stores the token, this auth token here in the auth constant. It decodes it. So this is emphasized in the Apollo tutorial that this is not the authentication method that you should be using in production, but you can use it with a proper, for example, JWT-based token approach. But it gives us the email by just decoding the token. We validate it, and then we use Prisma. We send a database query right here to find that user by that email. We even using include, so that was asked in the chat before, to also load the trips in case any resolver needs it. And then we're attaching that user object to the context object that all the resolvers are going to see. And that way our resolver, the data source that's invoked in the resolver now have access to this email.
And what's most interesting here, I don't want to derail too much, just real quick, but a fun note is that we're essentially optimistically requiring in these trips, and like you wouldn't necessarily have to, like, because that could be extra load, like extra time or latency, but a fun trick that you could do if you wanted to get so deep into it, and something that I've seen, is by using the info, the fourth argument, to the resolvers. But does that come through in context? I don't think it does.
The info object itself, I don't think it's part of the context, but it's just the fourth resolver argument. So it ends up in all resolvers, but I don't know how Apollo data sources work that it also arrives there. So
never mind. I digress. What I was getting at is that sometimes when you have a child resolver that's going to need some sort of data, you can start to fetch that ahead of time, like when you're in a higher resolver, but that actually wouldn't come into play here in context. So I'll be quiet. I digress.
If we want to, and in fact, I don't think that any of the sub resolvers actually need these strips. Or I think if I remember from the Sequelize there, they were also retrieved. That's why I use it. But I think theoretically you could also just omit it. And here we are things also just doing for illustration purposes, right? So
I'm fine with leaving it. That was just like getting into And again, this is all, like you said, it's a tutorial. Like you wouldn't auth this way. You don't necessarily have to load your data this way. This is just showing you kind of what you can do, and it's a good place to actually show includes, because it's something that is important. Sorry, I was just getting into like my perf mindset. It's like
let's optimize. One quick thing that actually might be cool to show is the TypeScript features of Prisma Client here by means of this query. Because the level of type safety that you get with Prisma Client is really just outstanding, and it right? If you hover over the type for it, and it's typed to user and with a trips field. So the user and trips field, these are the types that are generated by Prisma. They map to the models that we defined before. So if I now go ahead and use user dot, then I get the full auto completion again, that you don't
smoke it. Yeah, I'll do it. Dot. Boom, created at email, ID, tokens, trips, and then we can follow that kind of cascading path.
Exactly. Amazing. You can now say trips, and then because it's an array, you could say you have to pick the first one of that with just like you're calling like map on it.
And then boop. Oh, oops. Outside of that, boop. There we go. Yeah, and now we've got the individual properties. That's awesome.
Exactly.
And so go ahead.
Yeah, it also protects you from like, for example, like doing this. have a typo
Yes.
and you wouldn't otherwise recognize it in your code, here it just shows up as an error because it won't let you compile, because that's just the beauty of that TypeScript setup.
So NimGRG and I are on the same page here because they had the same question I was just about to ask, which is, can you use these types on the client as well?
It depends a little bit on your setup. If you have, in general, access to your Prisma client NPM module on the client side, then this works. So, for example, with a monorepo setup, this should be fairly straightforward. If your front-end project is in a completely separate project, then you would probably have to jump through a couple of hoops to get there, but there is nothing that stops you from doing that in principle, right? I mean, in the end, it's just like a generated index.d.ts files with all the type definitions that you can put wherever you want.
I want to take a note to mention that these might not actually be as useful on the client because these are the types for your database relations. When really on the client, you probably want your GraphQL types, right, for your queries and mutations, and that you can get with CodeGen, GraphQL CodeGen. Like there's a library that you could use to generate those types, which I think would probably be the preferable method there. But let's say you did need them for some reason, and it seems that with the proper setup, yes, you could extract them.
Right, and to be fair, there is a use case for that is getting a lot more prominent these days, and that's server components. With React Server Components, you will be able to use Prisma client directly inside of your React component. And of course, that's when this is coming in really handy, and where you're going to be able to use the types directly in your React component. And it's already possible today, for example, also with Next.js, if you're using get static props and get server-side props for static site generation and server-side rendering. That's also a use case where this is already relevant today. But if you just kind of three-tier architecture with a GraphQL server in the middle, then you're completely right, and it's not that useful because your GraphQL types are likely going to diverge to a degree from your database types.
Yeah, but wow, you were right. I didn't think about that. Like, if you're just going database right to something like Next or something like that, you could do server-side components. What a game changer that's going to be when that's like
we are super excited for that. We'll talk about that on our just to put a little bit of an ad here for our
drop it in
for our live stream tomorrow. We have the What's New in Prisma live stream every 2 weeks.
Oh, I didn't know that. You do that on YouTube on the Prisma channel?
Yes.
Cool.
Exactly, on YouTube, on the Prisma YouTube channel. And tomorrow we'll have our lead TypeScript engineer as a guest on the show, who's going to show you the demo that was built by the React team for server components, where they're sending plain SQL queries in the server component and Prisma client query.
Heck yes, I'm very
so that's what
interested.
You're going to get to see tomorrow.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So it seems we've got our now we should have user on context. So correct me if I'm wrong, but now the me query should work, right? This is.
I believe so. Let's go ahead and try.
Oh, still getting null, but
you have to restart the server, I think.
Oh, right, because it's context. Yeah.
So,
all right.
Yeah. Let's save the file this time. I think
it looks saved on my side. So we should be okay. Let's see. I'm so used to NodeMon that I forget you have to restart servers when you make changes.
In fact, there is a similar tool for TypeScript that's called tsNodeDev. That's basically the equivalent. And I have been using that, but for some reason it didn't kill the servers it didn't kill them properly, and I went into a lot of errors with it. Okay. During this stream, I'll just let you do the Control-C and restart every time.
Awesome.
At least the safer option. Awesome. And now the me query works, so we get the data back.
So it seems that someone in chat wrote a kind of a contrived example on how to get the GraphQL type generation going there. So I'll check that out later. There's a link there in chat, folks, if you're interested in that. Okay, so here we go. So me, that's me. I am me.
It works. All right. You could even already go and add a couple of trips to that, but actually no. Let's now go ahead. If you include the it should just return an empty array, I think, and then we can take the same approach that we're sending a query that doesn't work yet, and we're basically fixing it by implementing the corresponding data source method.
All right, so I'll just
if you say
I'll just do ID, keep it simple.
Trips and site, I think.
Boom, there we go.
Yeah, exactly. It just returns an empty array because we haven't booked any trips. There are no trips for our users in the database. So let's go ahead and implement the methods for that. I'm going to take over VS Code again.
All right. I love it.
Open up the resolvers and book trips resolver right here. That's relevant for us now. And that uses two data source methods that are relevant, book trips and get launches by IDs. I guess the get launches by IDs that is already implemented in the launch API data source. That's the one that talks to the SpaceX API, but book trips is what we're interested in. So here is the book trips method. And as we see, it basically just has this loop here where for each launch ID that's passed to the mutation, it will go and call the book trip method. So a single one, and that's implemented just a little bit further down. And that's where we need to add our code.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so this time I'm going to type it out pretty much by hand here. So for the book trip, the behavior of that is that it's somewhat similar to the find or create. So this method is supposed to check whether a trip already exists in the database. If it does exist, then we want to return it from here. Right. And if it doesn't exist yet, then we want to create it. And I could use Upsert again for this, but I just want to show you for this demo a couple of more like Prisma client operations, a couple of more queries. Yeah, so I'm taking the somewhat longer route here and just sending two base queries that each are responsible for this. If I wanted to go the efficient route, then I would just use Upsert again.
I like it. I would love to see more of the API. This is very informative.
And unique. That's really, I get my auto completion now.
Cool.
Perfect. And what's cool here in the where clause, because I'm using the find unique method to find a unique record. And find unique looks at my Prisma schema at the user at the trip model in this case, because I'm using prisma.trip find unique, and it looks at all the like I can now provide a filter for exactly the fields on my model that are declared as unique. And for one, this is going to be the ID, the primary key always has to be unique. Yep. But because I also declared this combination of fields to be unique, user ID, launch ID, I also get the corresponding option here to pass user ID and launch ID here.
Very cool. So instead of having to know the direct ID of the trip, you can reference it by these two properties instead, essentially.
Exactly. And because here launch ID is coming in, actually doing, it should be coming in as a number, I guess. I used the extra casting, and I just like to be safe because I used it before. Just use it, but I don't think. Actually, no. Let's try this. Derail a little bit from the safe path here. Make it shorter. But this is the user booked trip. So
if it exists, right?
Yeah. Exactly, like the currently authenticated user. So the authorization token authentication token that's sent through the playground. In this case, we're retrieving the user ID. If they booked the trip for this specific launch ID, then we have this. So then the user booked trip. That's what we'll return. Return user booked trip. And if then we're going to create with, again, a Prisma client query.
I really enjoy
the autocompletion.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, well, that's my computer probably just getting like, a little bogged down sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I would have would work across continents and be as flawless as I'm used to.
That's true. We are live sharing. That is actually, it's so mind-boggling when you think about it. But yeah, you're typing over in Europe. I'm here in Virginia Beach, and this is popping up. And then it's getting sent to Twitch, which who knows where their servers are. And then that's getting fed back to people all over the world. Like, it's just, when you think about the internet, like, it's just like, what? Like,
it's insane. It's insane. All right. Yeah, just to be 100% safe. All right, that should be the code. So first, if a trip exists with that user ID launch ID combo, if it does exist, then we're just going to return it. If it doesn't exist yet, we're using prisma.trip.create, passing the launch ID that we receive. We are connecting it to the user via the user ID and returning it from the method. So we can also make this a little bit more concrete here in that case. And instead of returning a I guess it would actually always return a. You have to go and import the trip from my client package as our type. So book trip is ready. Do we have to change anything here?
I'm so curious about how under the hood, like, because we define trip in our DSL, but then those types get generated and we can pull it from Prisma client. It's just like, it's so clever and also like good magic-y, you know?
I think that's interesting and maybe worth mentioning about this point at Prisma about Prisma client is that it's auto-generated, and that means it's not your typical node module. Like your typical node module is what you just install. You just download it from the npm repository, and the code that you get there will be pretty much the mirrored code from the respective GitHub repo, right? But because every Prisma client instance ultimately looks different, has different methods, it needs to be updated every time you update your Prisma schema, and that updated code goes into your node modules. So that is something that's worth pointing out about Prisma client, is that it really is kind of a dynamic or a smart node module that knows about your project structure and gets updated accordingly.
Yeah, that's a really good differentiation to make, because like that's not how it works with other ORMs, right? And that's part of the problem, is you're forced to fit within the bucket, right? And that is what gets it.
Exactly.
Real quick, not so smart contract, Mr. Windmills and Joey Nemu, thank you all for the follows. Much appreciated, y'all. We're happy to have you. But this is so that was like that was a light bulb moment for me right there, because in my mind I'm like, okay, so it's generating the types and Prisma client knows where to look for them, and then like the package, J2 Mac Williams, thank you for the follow, and so then but that's not the case. The whole client is generated based off of what you define in your schema.
Exactly. For example, click on type.
Okay. Let me do that.
in the
Go to definition. Go to type definition.
exactly. Yeah, go to type definition. Yeah, let's try that.
Said no type definition found.
Or
I'm gonna try go to
or
definition.
if you actually yeah, like not control click but command click actually.
Yeah, there we go.
And now you are in that mysterious Prisma client module. Prisma directory, and this index file very much mirrors your schema and exposes the TypeScript types that come from that.
Code gen is just like it's changing the entire landscape of developer experience, honestly. You know, you look at Prisma doing this, you look at Amplify and how they've taken something as heavy and terrible to work with as CloudFormation and put that behind a CLI. They generate that for you dynamically. CodeGen is very important in GraphQL, especially for iOS and Android folks. You know, that's a lot of very verbose code to be writing. It's just interesting to see this you know, the explosion of CodeGen, and I feel like, you know, it's only going to get probably like more impressive. But yeah, this is all very amazing stuff. Like this whole stream has just been like nonstop mind benders. So
that's great to hear. Yeah. That is great to hear. It's also kind of my favorite format to just like code along and just explain stuff along the way, responding to questions. So that's the most fun part of my job, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, I feel you. That's why we stream. That's exactly it. We love it. Cool. Okay. So we've got this going. So what's next? Like, what is? I think we can. Are we ready to book trips? I think that's the next step, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Let's give it a try.
We take the launch IDs. Yeah, let's head back to the playground, open a new tab.
Yeah, so
we have to restart the server first. And let me make sure to save the file.
It looks saved on my side. Okay, so we're good. So I'm going to restart it. And while it's restarting, we'll write up some queries and mutations. Because one thing we don't have right now is launch IDs. So I'm going to have to do a query to get the launches, which I had here.
You had that already, exactly. And so
right,
like these is the IDs from I think 10 or like in general I think the launch IDs are from 0 to 100 or even more. Like the ones that you get here I think are from 109 to 105.
Yeah.
So like why don't you book just like 2 trips for like 109 and 106 or something?
Got it.
If you scroll down I think yeah it'll count down.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just gonna do it. I mean, if 109 exists, let's hope 106 does as well. Okay, so mutation, book trips, and yeah, I'm not gonna pass any parameters. And then let's book trips, and then here we pass launch IDs, which is an array of IDs, and it's good that you use the number casting because they do in fact come in as strings. And so we're gonna book our trips. And then what we will get back on there will be success.
Yeah, let's use all of that.
Yeah,
and
launches,
the message or
yep. Launches ID, and then we'll get the message. Boom. And success, I believe, is flat, right? That's just a Boolean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like for launches, let's also include a couple more. Let's include like the mission, like the site, the mission with the name. Just like we want to get all the info about our trips here.
Yeah, sure. I love it.
Name.
You want anything else?
And I think.
I think it's good.
See if there is more on launch. Yeah, so like if you go back to into the launch, I think trip, you can get all the trips so that you can see who else.
Oh, so if we
actually
do
like the rocket.
Oh yeah.
Very sorry, my bad. You can't go from launches to trips. That's nonsense. Yeah. But you can check the is booked flag as well because that's something that we'll implement later.
Okay.
That's just a Boolean.
All right, I'll definitely do that. And then Rocket has under it, so we'll just do name. That's pretty cool. And then, sorry, where does is booked go?
It's like right under ID and site. It's also just a Boolean. So right. Inside of launches.
Yeah, got it. Because like, okay, let's do it.
Is that launch booked by the person that sends the token? And here we go. We just booked you to flights.
Yeah. It's weird though. It does say is booked
on Falcon 9
is false, but
is false. Exactly, because that's not yet implemented. We'll have to change that in a bit.
Got it.
Like that was the part in the resolvers where I said, okay, I made a little bit of
that's right. You
an
just
adjustment
returned
there.
false right now. That's right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Look at this. So.
And if you go back to perfect. If you go back to the me query, and you send this again, you get all the same info as well about your trips.
It's actually showing me an empty array still. Do we have to implement that part?
Do
we not attach? No, we should be returning user and trips, correct?
It might be that. Right. We have to implement the get launch IDs by user method in the user data source as well. Right. Because there is one more we need to do for that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that the me query also gives you all the.
It is. So. Oh yeah. No. Sorry. Yeah, that's what we'll fix now.
But you can do if we want to do that real quick, and that should, if you just refresh or if you open the trip model there, then we should already see the two trees in the database.
And there they are.
Yeah.
You have
two trips.
This is like the unsung hero of this stream. Like everything has been so super impressive, but just like this is so nice too. It's just like the icing on the cake, you know.
Glad to hear that. Yeah. Glad to hear. All right. Let's go back to VS Code and implement the get launch IDs by user.
Here we go. Quick question, which is something I actually read up a little bit about on Prism, but I don't think I'm qualified to answer. Just quick question is, does Prisma take care of the n+1 problem when you have nested queries? Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So prismaclient comes with a built-in data loader, and we don't have documentation on that yet, but there is from Prisma Day this year as well, how Prisma solves the n+1 problem in GraphQL servers, also by our lead TypeScript engineer. If you want to learn about how Prisma works under the hood there, then I would recommend this talk. But you don't need your own data loader when you implement GraphQL resolvers with prismaclient.
And so when at the very beginning of the stream, some of you folks might not have been here, but I was talking about how Prisma takes care of some of these common GraphQL problems that you face for you. And I didn't want to go too much into it, but this is one of the huge one that I was actually referring to, which is the n+1 problem, and having to manage your own like data loaders or just some form of database access optimization, which is generally very not straightforward. So to have that wrapped up for you in the ORM is just like, it's like, okay.
Helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. To say the least. It's an understatement.
All right, so we're back in VS Code. We are back in the user data source, and we need to implement the get launch IDs by user method right here. And what this is, we need to go into the database.
Following you anymore. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm following you again. We're good.
So we have to go into the database and find all the launch IDs that a certain user record is associated with at the moment. So how we're going to do this is we're retrieving all the trips for a specific user. Again, wait, this .prisma trip find many in this case. So we're loading all the trips that adhere to a certain condition. The where condition in this case is that the user ID of the trip has to be equal to the user ID that we get up here.
Yep.
Then I'm again copying some code that was written like this in the initial version of the tutorial. I'll go through it. It looks a little bit harder to read, but it's actually fairly straightforward. So what we get here is an array of trip objects. If you hover over the trips The trips variable is just an array of trip objects, and we're mapping over that. And for each trip, we're just checking, does it have a launch ID? And if it does, we just return the launch ID. And if not, it's -1. But we don't want to have the -1s in the result of the entire method call. So we are then filtering out the -1s.
Got it.
So it really just gives you all the launch IDs for a certain user. That's what this implementation does. And while we're at it, let's also go ahead and make sure that the isBooked on launch, the isBooked flag in our GraphQL query also is properly implemented. And the way how this works is that like right beneath, we have this isBooked on launch method that we can implement by checking if there is a trip for that. So again, I'm using a Prisma client query. I have a launch ID and a user ID. So I want to, again, check by the condition of the combination of the two, whether there is a record that adheres to exactly this unique condition with the user ID and launch ID, passing user ID and launch ID. I'm going to copy from here. And because this returns a Boolean, we're just going to cast the object to a Boolean. So if there is an object, we're just going to return true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. Yeah. And last thing that we need to do, just let me make sure that I save this.
Yeah, looks good.
In the result, the isBooked field is implemented on the launch type and the launch resolver. I just go back to the previous version of that calls out to exactly that method that I just implemented.
I love it.
All right.
All right, let's restart this thing. And,
I think, now the trips should appear in your me query.
And isBooked should be properly reflected.
And exactly. isBooked should now be true if everything went well.
Time will tell. Let's go, little server. You can do it. I like to encourage my servers. I personally think that it will make the code work. Even if the code was wrong, it will now work. And there we go. So we see we've got the IDs. I'm not going to go. Actually, let's expand it for the isBooked because I would have to run more mutations. So now we can just say isBooked. You know, we could go ahead and grab some of that mission data again if we wanted to, like the name. All right, so let's check it out. Boom, look at that. That is awesome. That is sweet. So we're coming up here on 2 hours, and I'm not bringing that up to like limit us in time. I'm bringing it up because we've only been programming for 2 hours with lots of chit chat and other things going on. Technically, we didn't even start right at 12 o'clock, well, Eastern anyway, with programming. And so we've already been able to implement creating essentially our database, getting our schema set up, working with our database, testing out that we can run queries and mutations. We've already got like basically a working GraphQL server, and we're at under 2 hours. This is super impressive. It's just,
time flew by, I think. We were in here for almost 2 hours. That's crazy. We could go and wrap up soon for sure. There is a cancel trip mutation that we could implement, but that's just like pretty much the same that we already did. I think one thing that could be interesting to wrap this up is to like maybe once more extend the data model real quick, maybe create a new table and show a couple of more like features of Prisma and how that projects to GraphQL.
I'm here for
so extending kind of the initial version of the tutorial.
Yeah, I am here for it. Let's do it.
What I've prepared for that is a way for you, Kurt, to bring your pet to the moon with you.
Yes, I love it.
Do you actually have any pets?
I have a lot of pets. We got many pets to pick from.
Well, I'm sorry because you can only pick one for
Oh,
the flight.
that's so tough.
We'll implement a one-to-one relation
Okay,
for the pet
that's
and the
fine.
user.
I'll bring Neptune.
But
I'll bring my dog Neptune.
all right, let's go back to the Prisma schema, and I'll make this a little bit faster because we've
Yeah,
seen
sure.
the code, so I'll just now go ahead and copy paste most of it.
Let's do it.
But of course, still take the time to explain.
Yeah.
So I'm in the Prisma schema. I am creating a new model right here with a pet. This has to be changed. So I want this to be a one-to-one relation between user and pet. So let me take this away, and that should be it.
Okay.
So what I did, that has a relation to the user to the user model. I called the user is the owner of the pet, and then the reverse relation fields on the user model. We have pet and pet ID, which represents the foreign key in the underlying database and is used right here on the relation field. That's how you define one-to-one and one-to-many relations in Prisma. And the difference between one-to-one and one-to-many is just that in this case, this is not an array, but just a single object. All right, this is not yet in the database. So again, we'll have to go and run a migration. So I can do that.
Yep. I shut down Prisma Studio, so I was in Terminal 2. Yep. I don't know. Okay, cool.
Saw that. Perfect. And I'm running the Prisma migrate command. I'm calling it add. So it'll go and create migration file and new timestamp pet directory here, apply the migration, create.
Yeah.
This also now earlier it's Prisma client for you. So that that we index.d.ts file with all the generated Prisma types, that now was have a pet type as well and all the types that it needs to query it. Exactly. If you hit the plus, then you already see that you have the pet there. Amazing. And again, just increased confidence, right? I'm sure that everything worked. I can just very quickly validate it.
Yeah, I have the right fields. So like everything is nice. Yeah is proper. I love this.
Everything's there. Add one mutation to our GraphQL schema, and the way is we're going into our schema.ts file right here, and we're adding what we call add pet for user, and that's going to reach a pet. The yet part of the GraphQL API, so I'll have to go ahead and create. It comes with a. Actually, copy this as well. So just it basically mirrors the definition from our Prisma schema, and then we also have the pet field on the user, so that for each user we can also query its pets. In order to get this to work, we have to update our resolver.
Yeah.
So first things first, we have to go and implement the pet field here to resolve the relation. Yeah. This time I'm actually taking a little bit of a taking the implementing something in the data source, but just
gotcha.
Prisma client instance directly in the resolver, so that's possible as well. And then just here, like sending the query, finding the right pet for the user who belongs to this resolver. And then, of course, also add the pet type itself and also resolve the owner right here. because we are expecting the Prisma client instance, the context. Remember, that's the third resolver argument here. Yep. We also need to pass it down into the context in the first place. So I'm making a change to index.ts, passing Prisma here to types in the resolvers, and we can fire our queries there.
So to be honest, that's kind of the way I've done most of my APIs. I like the data sources setup that the tutorial has, but to be honest, I've always just like attached my models into context or under like a DB object or something, right? And then just like or data, and then yeah.
Yeah, it very much depends on the kind of architecture you choose. Like I like the data source abstraction because it's nice for testing, and that's also part of the tutorial where you can then just like mock the data sources effectively in a really nice way. So it gives you a nice structure, but like nothing speaks against attaching your database interface directly to the context object and calling that in your resolvers.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the we have to implement the resolver for the mutation that I added. I did add it already in the schema.ts file, right? The add pet for user was the first.
Yep.
So let's go to the resolver and implement that. Just going to copy paste. In this case, I am going to use the data source again. So using a method that's called add pet for user. That takes the name of the pet as an argument. So that's the last thing that we need to add to the user data source. And right here, add for user. Go ahead and import that from our Prisma client. Here's the proof that it's there.
I love that it's still just like dynamically created. Here's all your types. Here's everything you need. It's so lovely.
And that's it. We have this method available. We are calling it our resolver. We implement the relation resolvers or the type resolvers for user and pet. Go ahead and bring your pet.
Let's do it.
Your dog.
Yeah. Oh, did we restart the server yet?
There we go. Let's restart the server and then
add some pets. All right. So starting it up, and then we'll jump over. I believe it is. Well, by the time I get this typed up, it should be running. Mutation, add pet to user, or whatever. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. And so then, add pet for user. That's what it was. Sorry,
you can pass
it's gonna bother me if I don't make a match.
Yeah.
All right, Neptune, and then here we could do something like owner, and then just for the sake of it. So let's run.
Recursively retrieve your own info.
Exactly, and look at that. How fast that was. So that's already done. But now let's test the other side of that, which is I'm going to do me and then access my pet. So if we come back here, name, and we run this, and there it is, Neptune.
Magic.
Love it. Absolutely.
All right. Amazing.
Huh.
Cool. Yeah, that was everything that I prepared.
We did it.
Hours. Nice.
Yeah.
That was very fun, Kurt. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah.
That was really amazing.
I mean, I had a blast. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing this with the Apollo community. Folks, if you have any other questions about Prisma, please reach out to Nick. His Twitter handle is like down in the corner somewhere over here. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, definitely reach out. And Prisma.io. Go right to the website. You can get lots more information right there. Is there anything else you want to share with folks? Again, they're going to be having a live stream tomorrow, correct? That's the next one?
Yes, exactly. That's 5 p.m. Berlin time. Okay. I believe 8 a.m. San Francisco.
Nice.
I think Eastern Standard is 2 hours behind, something like this.
Yeah,
But
2 hours in front. So it'd be about 10
it should
a.m.
be in the US morning.
Eastern. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. And then, yeah, anything else? Migrations, stay tuned. They'll be releasing soon. Again, please get in there, try it out. The more that you folks try it out, the faster that they can actually, do like the official release. And we can make use of this awesomeness in our day-to-day lives.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I guess that wraps us up for this. Just I guess on the Apollo side of things, Launchpad, the stream we normally do on Thursdays, is not going to happen tomorrow. Canceling it. Trevor, who is my co-host, is taking care of some family stuff, some personal issues. So we will pick that up next week. We have a lot more streams planned for you, so do come in. Yeah, if possible, do you push the code? So the code already exists, and I believe there's a branch that has Prisma configured. So I'll grab this repo again and drop it here in the chat. Already set up. You can go ahead and check that out. You've got access to that now. Yeah, I think, this was what I would like to call a huge success. I can't thank you enough. Again, Nick, one last time for coming on. And with that, I guess we'll bid you all adieu, and yeah, we'll see you all later. Thanks, everyone.
See you, folks. Bye.